Well, it was certainly a very good weekend for the box office because we had a three-way face-off between Creed 3, Scream 6, and 65 from Sony Pictures. We're going to talk about those box office numbers right now because there's a lot of fun things to discuss about them. Some good, some not so good. But we want to explain why. That's what you need to stick around for. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment, hit that little red subscribe button and turn it to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on your favorite social medias. And of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Let's take a look at the weekend update here, fresh from the numbers and from Deadline magazine. With absolutely no surprise, Scream 6 came in with the weekend topping figures, punching up to close to $45 million at this point. Creed 3 advancing in its second weekend to a total estimate right now as of $101 million in the domestic box office. This from our friend Anthony D'Alessandro at Deadline. Paramount and Spyglass Media's Scream 6 is at a new opening high this morning at $44.5 million after a Saturday that eased 20% to $15.4 off of a $19.3 Friday, which of course included some Thursday previews. As we've said all along, this is a huge weekend for Paramount. The #1 movie, a fireworks South by Southwest world premiere of Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which is already scoring a 92% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and 9 Oscar nominations today, including a Best Picture for Top Gun: Maverick. Very good studio synergy. The 6th quill of Scream came on tracking very strong, and it was clear then, as Deadline first told you, that this second Scream movie from Radio Silence would be a franchise best at the box office. Box office data from firm Intelligence says that 3.2 million people saw Scream 6, 18% of them in 3D screens. The movie grabbed 44% of its foot traffic in post-9 p.m. shows. Not a big shocker there for a horror film. Most people go to see those later at night, and that's one of the things that's often a boost to horror movies because unlike movies like Minions: Rise of Gru or some animated features like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, for example, those audiences tend to go during the day with younger children, so their tickets are much cheaper. But when you have a lot of adults going in prime time, 6, 7 o'clock at night and later, they're paying the highest ticket prices that are out there, and that does help boost those box office numbers for sure. One of the things that Scream had going for it was that it basically consumed every additional PLF screen out there that Creed was relinquishing, meaning that Creed had them both last weekend when it came out, and then this weekend, in a lot of places, Creed had to share the other PLF screen in a given movie theater. There's usually 2. With Scream 6, so that definitely helped. But there was one movie that was kind of left holding the bag, of course, that was 65 from Sony Pictures, and I do want to talk about that in just a minute, but let's finish up with the numbers. And this, to me, was one of the more fascinating aspects, as, frankly, Deadline really has not dove into these types of figures and social media metrics before, but let's see what they've got. Social Media Analytics Corporation Relish Mix measured a massive social media reach of 360 million at 2.4 times over horror franchise norms, and even besting the Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram count of Megan, which had 330 million followers. The Scream fan base has been infiltrating TikTok at 771,000 subscribers and another 349 million views, keeping in mind that the franchise pages have 11 million connected fans and growing. Paramount also dropped the spot for Scream 6 during the Super Bowl pregame, which popped up 24 million plus views in the first 24 hours after the game, while over on YouTube, fan posted and reposted mashups and reviews spot an exceptional 57-1 virtual rate off of 6 videos. And that goes to show just how studios and distributors are shifting a lot of marketing. There is far more engagement on social media now, especially for these types of films. Running TV ads is only going to get you so far, And while they're not buying as many ads on traditional broadcast or linear delivery stations anymore, that money is being reallocated into social media-driven campaigns, and those can be very costly. And this is why these marketing budgets for these types of films continue to go up. Now, with Scream 6, the budget for that film came in at a reported $35 million. Don't be at all surprised if the marketing budget is at least, if not higher than that $35 million, probably bringing the total cost to Paramount somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 to maybe even $80 million once you factor in marketing. But it's doing pretty well. Let's take a look at the numbers. And here's the weekend chart. Scream 6 racking up $44.5 million, Creed 3 $27.1 million this weekend, and 65 from Sony Pictures, bringing in $12.3 million, which is actually ahead of what was expected, believe it or not. They were planning for this movie only to make somewhere between $7 and $10 million, depending on the reports that you followed, but it came in a little bit better, and this movie's going to need some help, and we'll explain that in just a minute. But starting here with Scream 6, domestic box office at 44.5, international box office now clicking in at 22.6 for a worldwide box office haul of $67 million. Considering the $35 million reported production budget for this film, that means that this movie has pretty much made its entire production budget back in the first weekend. Again, as we remind folks that in the domestic market, that's the US and Canada, rentals come back to film distributors from exhibitioners like AMC, Cinemark, Regal, Marcus Theaters, IMAX, places like that, at an average of about 54 to 55%, somewhere in that range. And of course, that's usually performance-based. Bigger movies sometimes get a little bit of a bump, and smaller movies get a little bit less. It just depends. And of course, also the theatrical windowing schedule. If this movie is going to be granted a traditional 60 to 90-day run in theaters before it gets to a streaming service, it should command some of the highest rates available. On the international side, however, they only rep about 40% of that box office. So looking at this right now, Paramount Pictures should feel very good because at this point, all they have to do is get about another 60 to 70, maybe $80 million to cover the remainder of the expenses that would have come from marketing. I don't see that being a problem at this point. Paramount's got a good one on their hands, as horror movies should be, because they typically come in with lower than average budgets. But let's go on to the other movie that came out this weekend and see if we've got the same story. 65, a prehistoric adventure with laser guns, spaceships, an Earth in peril, and dinosaurs. $12.3 million at the domestic box office, $8.5 million on the international side, for a grand total of $20.8 million. Now, I actually saw this movie on Friday with Renegade Jr., and we enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film, and I was particularly blown away by how much Sony Pictures got out of the $45 million budget for this film. That's right, let me say it again, $45 million for a big, high-octane action suspense thriller, sci-fi action suspense thriller. Again, complete with dinosaurs and spaceships and all kind of stuff. It really was amazing to watch when you considered what the budget was and how well this movie turned out, visually speaking. And I thought Adam Driver did a great job carrying that film. It really goes to show that when you have a good actor like that and he's got a good script to work with, it's amazing what you can do. But all that being said, it's not going to help the fact that this movie is going to have a rough time coming up with any kind of profits at the box office at this point. Just to cover the $45 million production budget alone, this movie would need to pull in somewhere in the vicinity of about $90 million. And of course, that doesn't even include whatever they may have spent on marketing this film, which, to be honest with you, I don't think was a whole lot. Now, let me explain something about this. I've mentioned this before when we cover box office, so people need to understand the differences between how studios are handling their own IPs at this point in terms of the post-theatrical window. Sony is one of those studios that has a deal with an actual third party, namely Netflix, and that deal runs for several years and is worth well north of $1 billion over the course of time. That means when Sony makes movies like 65, they're almost making them for Netflix to one extent or another. And I kind of think 65 for sure looks like, with its budget of $45 million, Sony is looking to squeeze what it can out of the box office without having spent too much money additionally to the production budget to market this film and then have it wind up on Netflix in the next, say, 4 to 6 months. Now, the good news here is with a movie like this, if word of mouth continues to be relatively positive, then this movie should leg out fairly nicely over the course of time. One of the disadvantages that this movie had, to be sure, was the weekend that Sony chose to release it, with Creed 3 occupying 1 out of 2 on average PLF, that's premium large format screens in theaters, and Scream 6 having the other one. It's left no room for 65 to get the big screens with the bigger sound systems and the more expensive tickets. You see, I went to go see 65 on Friday, as I mentioned. I paid $14 for an adult ticket at a 4 p.m. show. Now, if that had been in an IMAX, if that had been in a PLF screen, that $14 ticket at the same theater location would have been closer to $18. So that has put a dent into this box office performance. So I think at this point, Sony is looking to get out of this. Maybe it makes $100 million worldwide if audience response is positive enough. But Rotten Tomatoes seems to indicate that it isn't, at least to some extent. The critic scores for this film have been abysmal, in the 30% range, but the audiences are in the 65% range. Again, if you lend any credence to what's on Rotten Tomatoes, I would suggest folks that like this type of genre will definitely enjoy it, and I give it my recommendation. And finally, Creed 3 is approaching $200 million, and on its $75 million production budget, that's good news. And it looks at this point that, at least provided it didn't spend a ton of money in marketing on this film, that it's going to be profitable here in the next couple of weeks in theaters. And don't forget, this is part of the United Artists Amazon play, so this is going to wind up on Amazon Prime at some point. This is Amazon's first big foray of having a movie made under one of their own subsidiary companies that they're putting into theaters and then putting on to Amazon Prime. We're going to see more and more of this, I think, going forward, and that's good news for theaters because that's one of the things they've been missing for the last couple of years, has been a wealth of movies getting into the box office to drive revenues. And finally, hanging on to the chart still in the 4th spot is Ant-Man and the Wasp: QUANTUMANIA, racking up roughly another $7 million from this past weekend. And if you notice, after 4 weekends in release, this movie is still not going to hit $200 million in the domestic market. And quite frankly, that is shocking. And the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios should be incredibly concerned at this point, if they're not already. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you get to see any of these 3 big theater pieces this weekend? Or did you see Creed 3 last weekend? Want to hear from you. Let me know what you thought of these films, or if you have any interest in seeing them at all. We love to hear from our audience out there, and we thank you very much for being here, almost to 20,000 subs because of folks like you. And don't forget to catch us today at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, March 12th for the Renegade Online live show right here on Valiant Renegade. We hope to see you there. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please, until next time, take care.